Welcome, and thank you for taking the time to come out tonight. We really appreciate it. I am Nicole Haberman, and I'm the assistant principal here at Westwood High School. And it's my real pleasure to welcome you to tonight's speaker event organized by Westwood Cares. And that's a committee dedicated to providing the community with information and resources around substance abuse, use, and related issues. Westwood Cares consists of varied representation from the community, including parents, public safety personnel, and school and town officials. A full list of all of the members is available in the lobby where you walked in. Westwood Cares aims to bring speakers whose area of expertise focuses on drugs or alcohol or other risk-taking behaviors. We hope to shed light on these topics that can be difficult to address and manage both as parents and as families, and I'll add as school administrators as well. We hope that you walk away from these events with useful information and with strategies on what to do or where to find additional resources that work best in your family and in your specific circumstances. All of our programming ideas come from the surveys that we collect at events, so please help us by completing that blue survey that you probably passed as you walked in, and hand them in as you leave so that we can ensure the most useful and relevant programming. We do read that feedback, and we take it into consideration as we develop the schedule. Before I turn things over to our speaker, I'd like to thank the Westwood Media Center for being here tonight to help cover this event and spread the word throughout the community. And now, I'm happy to introduce our speaker, Edgar Duran. Edgar runs the Metro Boston Tobacco-Free Community Partnership, housed at Health Resources in Action, which is a public health nonprofit housed in Boston. He does presentations on the tactics used by the tobacco and vaping industries, works on policy, works with the media, and all of that and more in 16 cities and towns, including ours here in Westwood. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Edgar. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll reintroduce myself. My name is Edgar Duran. I run the Metro Boston Tobacco-Free Community Partnership. The Community Partnership is funded by the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. They fund 8 community partnerships, 1 per region in the state. As was said, I do tobacco cessation and prevention work, mostly prevention, in 16 cities and towns, including Westwood. Today, we're going to be talking about the different tactics used by the vaping and tobacco industries. We're going to talk about the different types of products. We're going to talk about things that you can actually do, and I have some additional resources for you. I should note that the presentation is mostly for adults, as the youth are probably already professionals with this type of information. And at the end of the presentation, I have a lot of products here that the adults are welcome to come up, look at, touch, feel, smell, what have you. So first, we're here because we care about the youth. The vaping epidemic came out of nowhere. It has reached, as the FDA has stated, epidemic proportions. We're here to learn about the different tactics that the tobacco and vaping industries have used to target and trick youth into using their deadly products. We're here to learn about the different types of products, mostly new, but some of the old as well. And we're here to learn about what you can do. So first, I want to talk about youth and nicotine addiction. Nicotine is a highly addictive substance. Some studies say that it is almost as addictive, if not as addictive, as drugs like cocaine and heroin. Additionally, the human brain does not stop developing until around the age of 25. One of the last parts of the brain to develop is the prefrontal cortex. That's the part of the brain that has to do with a large portion of personality development, executive functioning, and decision-making, among other things. For some context, I'm 25, so my brain is now officially fully developed. When nicotine is introduced into a developing brain, it can change the way the brain is supposed to develop. It can prime a youth for addiction to other substances. It can cause issues like behavioral issues like anxiety, depression. It can cause nicotine addiction. Youth who intake nicotine through e-cigarettes, studies have shown, are also more likely to then move on to combustible cigarettes. It's been shown for youth that it is a gateway into combustibles, which we know are also extremely bad and have a bunch of horrible, horrible toxins that are entered into your body through it. People who start smoking as youth also have a much harder time quitting. That's because their brain is developed around the nicotine. They are going to have more unsuccessful quit attempts, and as such are going to be more disheartened, and it's going to become a much harder process in something that's already very difficult. So now I'm going to talk about the actual tactics. We've found that they use 3 primary tactics: sweet, cheap, and easy to get. First, I'm going to talk about sweet. When I started drinking coffee, I put a bunch of sugar, a lot of sweeteners. Now I can drink it basically black. My coffee drinking with sweeteners and sugar acted as a gateway or an entryway into being able to drink it black. Same thing can be said about flavored tobacco products. In 2009, we banned the sale of flavored cigarettes, with the exemption of menthol, mint, and wintergreen. That's the language they use in the law. The reason we banned it was because they were very attractive to youth, they were marketed towards youth, and they were seen as an entryway into combustible products. But the policy did not touch anything that was not a flavored cigarette besides menthol, mint, and wintergreen. So that didn't affect chewable tobacco, didn't affect cigars, and didn't affect e-cigarettes. What we've seen is that flavors are the #1 reason that youth use these tobacco products. As you'll see, e-cigarettes are the most popular. We've also learned that as people get older, they're less likely to be using flavored tobacco products. About 80% of 18 to 24-year-olds who have ever tried a tobacco product, that's just one time, said that they started with a flavored tobacco product. So what this says is that flavors are the entryway into other tobacco products that aren't necessarily flavored. It makes it so it's easier to use, makes it seem safe, makes it seem like it's okay. For vaping, there are e-liquids and juices that contain flavorings. Now, this makes it seem safe because we have flavorings in foods. We have flavoring in candy and all types of foods. These are within the e-liquids. But the difference between our lungs and our stomachs are that our stomachs have acids that can break down these flavorings. Our lungs don't. So we don't even know what these flavorings are going to do to lungs, especially those in youth. There's just not enough data yet. We know that flavors are extremely appealing to youth, as I've said, and there are thousands of different flavors, about 8,000 individual flavors. You'll have flavors like chocolate, strawberry, vanilla. You'll have flavors that are reminiscent of cereals, like I've seen one that looked like Fruity Pebbles. And then you'll have what I like to call concept flavors. This one, in particular, is called Naked Unicorn. What does a Naked Unicorn taste like? I called, and they said it was strawberries and cream. So because we know that flavors are the #1 reason that youth are using these products, 145 cities and towns across Massachusetts have restricted the sale of flavored tobacco products, with the exemption of menthol, mint, and wintergreen. What this means is that all flavored tobacco products have been taken out of basically every store that has a tobacco retail license, except for specialty shops called adult-only tobacco retailers, where you have to be 21 to even enter the door. This is something that Westwood has. Now there's cheap. When I purchase a shirt on a whim, I like to wear it once or twice. Now, if a youth does this with a tobacco product, that once or twice can be enough to hook them, get them addicted to the nicotine because of how addictive nicotine is. We've seen this before with little cigars. They used to be 2 for $1. Now we're seeing it with e-cigarettes. They're not 2 for $1, but there are promotions, there are special offers, you can get discounts, and these low prices create impulse buys. Because of low pricing creating impulse buys and how cheap little cigars used to be, 175 cities and towns in Massachusetts have passed policies that restrict the sale of cheap single cigars. What this does is, for one cigar, it's $2.50. For 2 cigars, it's $5. And then anything more is $5 or more. Some cities and towns have put 1 is $2.50, 2 is $5, and 3 or more is $7.50. But this is also something that Westwood has. What we've seen is that price increases are extremely effective. For every 10% increase, we've seen a 7% decrease in youth smoking rates. Youth cigarette smoking is currently at its historic lowest, with 6.4%, which is great, but we fear that e-cigarettes, since they act as a gateway to combustible cigarette smoking, will reverse all the work we've done in the past 20 years. So now, easy to get. If they're easy to get, by that I mean they're everywhere. You can get them at corner stores. You can get them at convenience stores. You used to be able to get them at pharmacies, not anymore. I'll get into that a little bit later. You can buy them online, and then the specialty adult-only tobacco retailers. This availability sends the message that these things are okay for youth to be using, which they're not because their brains are still developing. And youth that are exposed to tobacco products in stores are also more likely to start smoking compared to their peers who aren't exposed to these products. When I was younger, I would go to convenience stores daily. Now, not so much. I go maybe once or twice a month, maybe at most 5. So because of this, 125 cities and towns have capped the number of tobacco retail licenses. For example, X town would only allow 50 tobacco retailers in general, which can include convenience stores, corner shops, gas stations. Some places have even done double capping, where of that 50, only 5 are allowed to be adult-only tobacco retailers. I'm just throwing out random numbers for the example. This is something that Westwood has, which is great. Westwood also has, if I'm remembering correctly, after a license expires, after a license expires and it is not renewed, it is then forfeit. It just disappears. So they have a cap, and eventually the goal is that it'll go to 0. Additionally, 119 cities and towns have also prohibited issuing new tobacco permits within 500 feet of a school. This is to reduce youth use and exposure to these tobacco products. Again, this is something that Westwood has, which is great. So the good news is our policies, our tactics, our strategies, they're working. We've been able to drive down youth tobacco use across the board. The bad news is the vaping and tobacco industries are still using the exact same tactics, and they're still working. As you'll see, as vaping advertisement, as financing for advertisement from the vaping industry has gone up, so has youth use of these products. Some of the advertisements even look exactly the same as old cigarette ads, just a new face, brighter colors, and instead of a cigarette, it's an e-cigarette. Some of them are even on the platforms that youth use, like previously, Instagram and Facebook. Some of them have been taken down since then. So now I'm going to talk about the actual products and what vaping actually is. First, a little bit of data, though. In 2017, 41.1% of Massachusetts high school youth stated that they had ever used an e-cigarette. That means just one time in their entire life. And current use, defined as once in the last 30 days, was at 20.1%. This was higher than any other tobacco product combined. Now, I have a few things to say about this. First, this number was in 2017. This was before Juul, which is the most popular e-cigarette, and the explosion of their popularity. So the number is likely much higher. So this I'm going to refer to as a pre-Juul number. Second, this dispels a huge myth that everyone is using these products, when really, though the numbers are really high, it's not everybody. This also puts us as adults in a perfect opportunity to be able to talk with our youth, talk with them, not at them, and be able to steer them away from using these deadly products. So vaping, it is essentially the inhaling and exhaling of an aerosol. People call it vape, but it's not a vapor. It's an aerosol like a hairspray or the pan spray. Inhaling and exhaling an aerosol through an electronic nicotine delivery system, e-cigarette, vape, vape pen. There's a variety of different names for them. Sometimes people will even call them just by their brand name: Blue, Bow, Fix, Juul, Bird. There's a variety of different names. They even come in a variety of different shapes. They can look like basically any type of product. Now, they're even starting to look more high-tech, would be the best word I can think of for it. There are basically 3 versions of e-cigarettes. There's the rechargeable e-cigarettes, which previously were all closed systems. So you would purchase a cartridge that was pre-filled, throw it away when you were done using it. But now some of them are becoming open system. Either way, you can recharge it and be able to continue reusing it. Then you've got disposable e-cigarettes, one-time use, throw it away. Juul is the most popular of the rechargeable e-cigarettes. Now, I don't know if any of you have noticed, but I've been charging my Juul this entire time, in my laptop. It charges through the USB. I'll put that back here, and I'll leave it up here so people can look at it later. Juul is an e-cigarette that is extremely popular with youth in high school and young adults in college. We're also starting to see it in middle schools as well. It looks just like a USB drive, charges right inside the computer. It's been called the iPhone of e-cigarettes. They designed it this way, it was on purpose, to try to attract younger audience. Sleek, slender. It's got a nice little grip to it and doesn't look like a cigarette, which we've been really good at drilling into the youth that is bad for you. And it's also small enough to fit right in the palm of your hand. It's pretty comfortable. Then you've got tank systems. Now, there are two types of tank systems. You've got the big, large tanks, which have a lot more control. You can really control the intensity of the aerosol that comes out after you inhale and exhale. And then you've got the vape pens, which are, you don't have as much control, but regardless, both of them are refillable. Now, as I said before, there are over 8,000 different flavors. They look like a variety of different products that we use. Sour Dream, Sour Patch Kids. They do this on purpose to try to trick youth into using their products by making it seem like it's something that's safe. Then you've got pods, which go into a lot of the rechargeable e-cigarettes. You've probably seen those littered around somewhere at some point. Maybe didn't really know what it was. Kind of looked like a small USB, but not a USB expert because it looks kind of strange. Now, as I said before, they've got a variety of new looks. They look like a variety of different types of technology. They've got things that look like the Sur & Drop. Kind of looks like the highlighter. I have one here as well. And a little highlighter or a whiteout, just for comparison. You've got a variety of different looks, variety of different names that are very fun to say. Bird, Blue, Bow, Fix, Juul, Elite. Regardless how they look, though, they work the same way. They've got four basic components. You've got the battery, which powers the device. You've got the atomizer, which heats up the aerosol for inhaling. It's also the part that studies are starting to show that have a lot of heavy metals being entered into the aerosol. You've got the cartridge, which stores the e-liquid, and then you've got the mouthpiece, where you inhale. Now, I want to reiterate, this is an aerosol, not a vapor. Because it's an aerosol, it has a variety of chemicals that we know are bad for us. You've got nicotine, highly addictive. You've got volatile organic compounds. You've got ultrafine particles. You've got cancer-causing chemicals and heavy metals. We know that these are bad for people. These are especially bad for developing youth. They may be at a lower rate than that of a cigarette, and the FDA has said that e-cigarettes are less harmful than cigarettes, but that's kind of a low bar to set. Then you've got flavorings. We don't know what most flavorings are going to do to our lungs. Like I said, our stomachs have acids, our lungs don't. There is one flavoring in particular that has been found in some e-liquids called diacetyl. We know that diacetyl has been linked to a serious lung disease. It causes like a scarring of the lung called popcorn lung. It gets its name because in the early 2000s, there were popcorn factory workers who started developing the scarring of the lung tissue. They linked it back to the flavoring diacetyl. It was used in popcorn to kind of give like a buttery flavoring. Since then, there's been like a lot of protections put into place for these factory workers. There's been some popcorn manufacturers have stopped using it altogether, but we've seen it within some of the e-liquids. I haven't heard of a case of popcorn lung through someone who's vaped, but it is still a possibility, and there's no telling what else could happen. Now, as I said before, nicotine is highly addictive. Nicotine is within most of the e-liquids and vapes. Juul specifically always has nicotine. They have one of their little pods, which is about this big, has the same amount of nicotine as a pack of cigarettes, 20 cigarettes. They also use a different formula that makes it so it enters the bloodstream a lot easier. But in all the other e-liquids, we can't really know how much is in them. The FDA has found in some studies that even though it says 0, they found trace amounts of nicotine. And since nicotine is highly addictive, it means that we can't fully trust this. That's because the FDA has not fully regulated these products. They've chosen to wait until previously it was 2022, now it's 2021 for the e-cigarette manufacturers to release what they put inside of their products. For example, this was a picture that one of my colleagues took about a year ago at this point. If you look on the front, it says 0 nicotine. Perfect. I'm just gonna get some berry belts, some delicious flavoring. You look on the back, it says this product does not contain nicotine. Awesome, I'm safe. Then you go all the way to the ingredients, the very last ingredient, nicotine. What this tells us is that we cannot trust what these products are telling us until they are fully regulated, because we just can't know. So, are e-cigarettes safe? This is a very common question that I get. It's very difficult to tell right now because there's just not enough research. But what we can tell you for certain is that they're not safe for youth, they are not safe for young adults, they're not safe for pregnant women, and they're not safe for anyone who has never used a tobacco product or is not currently using a tobacco product. Just because nicotine is within it, it's highly addictive. This also tells us that secondhand vape, secondhand aerosol, also unsafe because it has all of those chemicals within it. Like I said, we still need more research, and more research is to come. We just don't have anyone who was started when they were young and went all the way to adulthood like we do with cigarettes. So, can these be used to vape other substances? Short answer, yes. Long answer, the open systems, you just put a different type of substance within the e-cigarette. For a closed system, youth are crafty. They found ways to be able to adapt their product to be able to intake other types of substances. I have also learned that will likely harm the e-cigarette for people who are using it, and it will most likely void the warranty if there is one. How do you know if a youth is vaping? You'll smell like an unexplained sweet scent. I have heard from teachers that they've turned around, write something on the board, they'll smell like a sort of fruity scent, kind of like perfume, then they'll hear snickering, they'll turn around, and they'll see absolutely nothing. But they know that someone just vaped within the classroom. They just can't prove who. Then you'll see unfamiliar products. They're coming out constantly with new looks, new styles, making them look like school supplies, in my opinion. So it can kind of be tricky. I have a story of another teacher who had a youth drop an item. The teacher picked it up, looked at it, kind of looked like a USB drive. They weren't 100% sure, kind of looked a little strange. They're not a USB drive expert. So they gave it back to the youth, said, you dropped your USB. After getting a presentation like this, they learned it was a Juul. They weren't exactly happy about that. So what we're seeing is the same exact tactics that have been used on cigarettes, that have been used with cigars, blunts, blunt wraps, and chew tobacco, but with e-cigarettes. All those products are explicitly made to be sweet, cheap, and easy to get. You can still get them at all of the same exact locations, corner stores, gas stations, and specialty shops, the adult-only tobacco retailers. In Westwood, you can't get the flavored products, but you can still get those. And the emergence of vaping, they're just taking the exact same tactics from the cigarette company playbook. But we have come a long way. We've seen decreases across the board on youth use of these tobacco products. Now, I want to, again, reiterate that 20.1%, take it with a grain of salt. There's a pre-Juul number. So the number is likely higher, but for right now, 2017 data is the best that we have for this. So what kind of things can you do? Well, you can educate yourself. Be aware of what these products look like. Be aware of what they feel like, what they might smell like. That's what you're doing right now. You're learning all the information you can. There's also additional resources that I'll share in a little bit for more. Know about different policies, laws, and procedures. For instance, as of December 31st, 2018, across the entire state of Massachusetts, it is 21 to purchase a tobacco product. There is an exemption that does not apply to Westwood just because you were 21 prior to this date, but I'll share it anyway because it gets confusing with some retailers. If you turned 18 prior to December 31st, so December 30th or earlier, you can purchase tobacco forever. If you turned 18 on the 31st or later, you have to wait till you're 21. It gets really confusing for retailers just because if the city or town was 21 before this date, then that doesn't apply. It also includes e-cigarettes in the definition of tobacco. If you can't smoke there, you can't vape there. It expands the smoke-free workplace law to include e-cigarettes. You can't vape, just like you can't smoke where people are working or indoors. And it bans the sale of tobacco, including e-cigarettes, in pharmacies, hospitals, basically places that sell health. They finally decided that if you sell health, you shouldn't sell death. Massachusetts is the first state in the entire country to do this, which is great. Then there's also the Education Reform Act. Basically, if just like you can't smoke on school property, you can't vape on school property. Then there's local policies. If you go to makesmokinghistory.org, you click on My Community, you'll find like a little drop-down menu, find Westwood. You'll be able to get a 3-page little fact sheet that will compare Westwood to the state of Massachusetts and be able to see where you rank up. It hasn't been updated in about a year, so it's due for an update soon. But if you see any information on there, you can feel free to call me. I'll put my number up there again soon, and I can give you updated information. One of the good things you can also do with this is find your own city or town, find a neighboring city and town, and be able to compare. It'll give you 2 separate 3-page documents, but you'll still be able to compare it. Then there's the 84. The 84 movement is a youth-led movement to fight big tobacco. They get trainings. They are formed through high schools and local organizations. You need, I believe it was 1 adult advisor and at least 5 high school youth. They're currently trying to figure out some stuff for middle school to be able to involve middle schoolers, but that's still probably a year or 2 away. They do a lot of peer-to-peer education. They do a lot of local activities. They get to go to events. For instance, earlier this month, there was Kick Butts Day, where youth from across the state went to the State House. They were trained and prepped beforehand, and then got to speak with their legislators and talk to them about vaping and issues that they care about. I went with a lot of the youth, and it was amazing. A lot of them, it was their first time, and they were prepped so well. So honestly, the 84 looks great on a resume. Westwood does not have an 84 chapter currently, so if anyone's interested, let me know after, and we can talk. Next thing, talk with your youth as a trusted adult. Talk with, not at. When you talk with them, you want to provide them with facts. Tell them that e-cigarettes contain nicotine. You want to dispel myths. It's not water vapor. Not everyone's doing this. You want to tell them that tobacco and vaping industries are trying to target them, trick them, and get them addicted to these products. Tobacco, cigarettes are the only product I can think of, when used as intended, kills over half of the people who use it. So they need youth, so they try to trick youth. They get youth addicted to these products, they have a customer for life because of how hard it is to quit. Ask them what they see, ask them what they think, get their opinion. They see this, they potentially see this daily, have friends who do this, get their opinion. Be patient, ready to listen. There's no such thing as a perfect time to talk. Maybe you go home today to ask your kid, how was your day? It was good. How was your day? Oh, it was great. I had a presentation today. Perfect entryway to talk to your youth. Ask your child what they think. Be open, honest. Now, if you yourself are a current tobacco user, there are resources for you if you are interested and are ready to quit. Regardless, tell your story. Tell the youth what you think. A lot of people who I know who started smoking before the age of 18, they wish they never started. And if you tell this to a youth, it can actually be pretty powerful, especially since this is just the exact same product with a different face. So now I have some additional resources. First, there's getoutraged.org. This is the home base for the Massachusetts Department of Public Health's adult-focused vaping campaign. It has a lot of resources that are available for adults to learn more. It's constantly being updated. There's a toolkit that's for schools, has a lot of information, also constantly being updated. It's a living document. And then there's the Massachusetts Health Promotion Clearinghouse. The Massachusetts Health Promotion Clearinghouse, you Google it, you'll be able to find it. You're able to order a variety of resources for free. Then there's makesmokinghistory.org. It just has general information about the tobacco cessation prevention program, has a lot of tips that are helpful for people who are trying to quit. It also has the My Communities tab. So there's a lot of information and resources available. Two things that I did forget to add onto this PowerPoint. One, the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, as of earlier this month, launched their youth-focused vaping campaign. You can order the youth-focused vaping campaign through the Massachusetts Health Promotion Clearinghouse. They have posters and pamphlets that have been tested with youth through focus groups. That's why it took so long to launch. That is housed at mass.gov/vaping. You'll be able to find that there. Then there's smokefreeteens.gov. This is a peer-to-peer sort of a youth cessation resource specifically for smoking. They're great. They're research-based. They do not do vaping, however. There is one vaping resource that is available that, again, didn't put into the slide. My apologies. If you search Truth Initiative Quit Vaping, you'll be able to find an article. At the bottom, it'll have a number where you text quit to. When you text quit to that number, they'll send you some questions to kind of gauge where you are, how much you, like what age you are, how many times a day are you using your e-cigarette, and some other data gathering information. I have some colleagues who have tried it. I haven't, just because I don't want to skew their data. And then they'll send you daily texts asking you, usually at night, how did you have trouble not using your e-cigarette today? How many times did you use it today? Things like that. Then they give you tips, tricks on how to quit. Maybe to try to make it so it's easier the next time, just because this is a very hard process. Now, does anyone have any questions? I'm gonna leave my information up there. Yeah.
You said that the secondhand smoke, what vapor is bad for them as much as secondhand smoke, but you weren't able to say what kind of chemicals are in the exhaust.
So they have a lot of chemicals that are very, oh, sorry.
I was wondering if you could tell me what's in the secondhand smoke, what are the chemicals that are coming in, you said metals?
Yeah, so there are heavy metals like tin, lead. There are a lot of cancer-causing chemicals, very similar to those that are in cigarettes, but it kind of varies depending on the e-liquid, just because we don't know entirely what's in them. We just know that they...
That from the process of heating up the metal?
So the metal... That's a good question. I don't actually know the full answer. All I know is that there was a study done that looked at the aerosol from the e-liquids, but it had to use an e-cigarette to be able to create the aerosol, and they found there were heavy metals in it, and they linked it back to the atomizer. I don't know if there are already heavy metals that are within the e-liquids, but we can't fully know just because they're not required to tell us everything until 2021. Does that kind of answer your question? Okay. Oh, by the way, the question was regarding the types of chemicals that are within the aerosol. I should repeat them. Any other questions? Yes.
Do the laws apply the same for online purchase as walk-in purchase, or are they different?
So you do have to be 21 to purchase these products in Massachusetts. They have different laws based off of the states, so to be able to send it. The Attorney General is looking into really cracking down on the online sales, just because that's kind of like a loophole. There are ways that youth can get around the verification process, and not all of the e-cigarette makers have the best verification process. They've been better. They've tightened them up. For example, Juul's looking into trying to strengthen their verification process even more, but it's still kind of up in the air. But for the most part, the laws still do apply. Yes?
What are the other liquids that you're finding they're trying to appeal with the e-cigarette devices?
I forgot to repeat the last question. But this question was about what other types of chemicals are people trying to, or substances are people trying to inhale through the e-cigarettes? There's THC oils, and I have read one story, I believe it was, the FDA released a statement saying that people should not be trying to vape, I believe it was Viagra. So people have tried some interesting things. Those are just to name two off the top of my head. I'm sure there's more, but I don't know all of them. Yes.
Yes, so if I understand this correctly, there's some research or literature that's saying that for adults who are addicted to cigarettes, vaping may be a transition step for them to get off of cigarettes. But the concern here is with respect to 25 and under, where the brain is not fully developed, and kids who may not have been on cigarettes to begin with at all, the nicotine is addictive to them, and there's, so I guess what I'm saying is, maybe you can comment on this, is that there's different cases here for adults and kids, right? So for some adults, vaping may have benefits over smoking, but for kids, the dangers seem to be pretty clear.
Yep. So I do want to comment on that. So for adults, it's not so much benefits as they are less harmful. There is the issue when adults try to, when they are transitioning to e-cigarettes, they're using both at the same time, so they're getting extra from both, which is really horrible for them. But if they fully transition, the FDA has stated that it is less harmful for them. But less harmful doesn't mean harmless. I like to equate it as getting hit by a Honda Civic going 50 miles an hour versus getting hit by a 16-wheel truck going 50 miles an hour. The tobacco industry kind of set a really low bar for what is less harmful. But yes, adults who have swapped to e-cigarettes completely, it is less harmful for them, and there's not enough research right now to say otherwise. But yeah, youth is our focus. Youth prevention is what we want to achieve. We don't want youth using these products. We don't want youth getting addicted to these products. We don't want youth having full access to these products to get addicted and then transition to combustible cigarettes. Does that answer? Awesome. Yes.
So the laws in Massachusetts are 21 and over. We don't know the data on how many people are juuling, but we know it's in high schools and middle schools pretty actively. This may be a silly question, but where are all of these kids getting access to the devices?
Okay, so the question was, where are all the youth getting access to these devices? Okay, I don't remember the exact number. I believe it was around 70 to 75% have stated that they get them from the community stores. Then 50%, 50 to 60%, somewhere in that range, get them from a local, one of their friends, like the circles. Not necessarily a friend circle, could be a family circle. And then some of them are getting it online. But the vast majority are getting them from their, whatever stores are in their community, like a convenience store, or getting them from someone they know. Does that answer your question?
So are there consequences for older kids getting buying these and passing them on to younger kids? Because that's what I've heard. Older siblings, things like that, order them on Amazon, get them at the local store, and then pass them off to younger children. Is there a consequence that we can talk to our children about? Like, if you do this and your friend or your older sibling or your older cousin or anything like this provides you with these, they can get into trouble? Are there any legal ramifications for that?
That depends on the city or town. I can't fully comment it because I'm not like a legal expert, but I have heard of some cities and towns trying to put possession and use, they're called PUP laws, I don't remember what the acronym stands for, so that youth who are caught with these products do get in trouble, but a lot of the police have actually stated that that's not exactly effective, just because of another law I can't remember the name of, that was passed that kind of made it so that the first offense for youth was kind of hand-waved. But there are some cities and towns who have implemented some of those things. But personally, think that trying to blame the youth who have been tricked and coerced into using these products isn't exactly the way to go, as so much as trying to keep them away from seeing these products, being exposed to these products, having access to them. Now, does that answer your question? Awesome. And then you had...
So, what can schools do to deter kids from using these products? I mean, obviously, legally, it looks like it's not much, but, you know, these are those people who do, but what can schools do to, you know, hold kids accountable? I mean, first of all, I guess I can catch them, but if you do, if there are things to call, you know, what can schools do to punish them?
The question was about what can schools do when to, one, try to catch the youth who are using these products, and for punishment. Catching the youth portion first. Some schools have started purchasing these, they're sort of like smoke detectors, but they're vapor detectors. They're a little bit more sensitive. They're kind of expensive. I don't remember the exact price, but they were up there. When it detects the aerosol, it sends a live text to whoever's on call, and then that person can go straight to that location. The most popular places that youth use these products are the restroom. Some have even started calling them the jewel room, just because people go into the stalls and jewel, which is the most popular of the e-cigarettes. In terms of punishment, it depends on the school. Some schools have done suspensions. I personally don't think the suspensions is necessarily the best, just because once a youth is taken out of the school, then they're just going home and they're vaping still. What some schools have started to do, it's I can't remember the word for it, but basically when a youth is caught, they basically have to go through a required process therapy. The word's gonna come to me at some point, and then I'm gonna be a little mad that I didn't think of it, but there's some schools that are starting to do this process. For instance, Needham has started doing the word I can't think of. Not restorative justice. It's like it's like a program. Diversion. Yes, thank you. Diversion programs. Some schools have started doing diversion programs, which have some have seen some success. Some are still attempting because it's still a new thing. And e-cigarettes are still so new that we're still trying to figure out what to do. Does that answer your question?
Well, I guess follow-up is, what can you at home? Can you use those same, you know, devices you're talking about, the detector?
You can. They're very expensive. I want to say they're upwards like 500 plus. So per detector, maybe 400. I can't remember off the top of my head. But talking with your youth is usually a very effective strategy.
But when they have friends coming over, you know who's coming in with what.
That is fair. That is fair. The best thing you can do after talking with your youth and letting them know what you feel about this, and kind of getting their opinion and talking to them and dispelling some of the myths, just knowing what the products look like. Because since doing this job, I've started to notice it a lot more than I used to, just because now I know what they look like. I know what it looks like when someone's actually using one. So you can kind of start to see those subtle signs and then talk to them after or when you've caught them. That would be the best thing I could think of.
Yes, I don't know if it's peer review or comment on it, but I believe, to the extent this is helpful, I believe that this product is banned by the MIAA, right? So it's a nicotine product. You know, a student that has this would face consequences under MIAA rules. So any sort of, you know, whether you're supporting it or not, you know, just having any position in a school building could potentially have those types of consequences. I don't know if the MIAA is doing anything else okay, but it seems to at least, I think, have that in the policy.
Yeah, they do have that. They are not allowing youth who play sports, once they've been caught, to actually continue to play sports, which can have can have a pretty effective effect on their future use. Besides, it was just mostly a comment on what you had said. Yeah, that is a thing that they are doing. Any other questions? another common question that I get is, what other kinds of things can the school do to help with prevention? On the prevention side, there's this curriculum called the Catch My Breath curriculum. It is a free curriculum. It is, I want to say it was like 6 parts, that like a health teacher or some teacher does for their class. It's interactive. It's evidence-based. If the school is interested in that, I also have a contact who works at Health Resources in Action, funded through CVS, who will do the first session for you for free. And then the intention is that the school continues it afterwards. She's very popular currently, so her schedule will probably fill up pretty quickly, but if you're interested, I can give you her contact later. Yes?
Are there any watch groups that are actually testing the juul material? So the FDA said you don't have to list what you have for chemicals inside. What is the pod? Some in the pod. So all you have to do is actually synthesize what's in the pod, and you know the chemical. Reverse engineer. Are there any watchdog groups that are doing that? Putting out that information?
There are studies that are trying to figure out a lot of the information about what effect they'll have, what kind of stuff is in them, but there's a lot of variation depending on the company. I can't say for certain, mostly because it's not my area. That's not like the type of... I'm going to look into that, though, because I'm actually curious, but I don't know off the top of my head. Yes?
Do the cartridges, say the Juul cartridges, have their logo imprinted on them? Or are they just blank, so that they're not noticeable?
So these are blank. These are some of the cartridges for Juul. They are just a little color with a little mouthpiece. It's not too distinguishable, but the Juul itself does say Juul on it. It's in black and kind of just engraved into it. So for the most part, no, they don't have their logo on it. Okay.
But they are making sleeves to cover them.
Yes. Youth have been decorating their Juuls. There are sleeves that can be purchased for them. Some youth scratch things into their Juuls, like their name or an image, try to customize it, kind of like an iPhone. Yes?
I actually have a question for Mr. Bevan. Would you mind commenting on what you're seeing here at the high school?
Yeah, and the statement's here too as well. We're seeing everything that regionally and all the towns around us and nationally is happening. Is what Edgar's saying is a big spike in use of e-cigarettes happened a couple of years ago, and then once Juul came around, it just became more attractive for whatever reason. I think the packaging or the marketing or I think actually the delivery of the chemicals was such that it just became like a viral kind of appeal for our kids. We're seeing that a great deal. So whereas we might not see any kids or just a totally ordinary number of kids coming in and out of bathrooms 5 years ago, now you can go into a bathroom and there would be a lot of kids washing their hands for extended periods of time, and we are trying to get our heads around that. And this detection system that Edgar's referencing is something we're going to be talking to parents more about in the next 2 weeks probably.
And I'll add to that, one of the challenges with the transition of kids moving from cigarettes back in the day to this is that when kids are in the bathroom using it, there's not a cloud of smoke. There's not that aura that makes it easy to tell whether it's actually happened, and if so, who's done it. And so it becomes really difficult and very challenging for us as school administrators to actually tackle the problem. We know it's happening, but absent somebody literally standing in the bathroom to watch what's going on, it's nearly impossible to get our hands around it unless somebody reports it, or unless a teacher happens to go in there to wash their hands or use something in the restroom and see it. So it is a really big challenge, like Sean was saying, and it's something that we're working really hard on. What Edgar was saying earlier about some of the prevention pieces we've actually done here at the high school, For instance, Peggy Presdalion, who's here, who's our school nurse, and she's here in the back, led the charge with substance abuse prevention materials to be handed out during Substance Abuse Awareness Week, which was about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken, where we put some of the materials that you're seeing around here all over the school and sort of like paper-coated the walls with all the information just so kids could see it. There were announcements made in homeroom and a whole series of other activities to start the education campaign that I know I was familiar with back when I was in high school for the anti-smoking pieces. And so all of those things we're doing, and we're trying to make an active, sort of situation with those vape detectors that Edgar referenced. They are quite expensive, but we are going to be doing some work with that in the future because that may be the only way that we're able to stop what's happening in our restrooms and therefore keep the kids safe and prevent some of the issues that we're seeing.
I know that the wellness teachers did incorporate some of the information into their wellness classes, so they're also doing that as well, which is what you mentioned earlier.
And now there is a youth-focused vaping campaign that is targeted towards youth. You'll probably not see any of the online ads that the Massachusetts Department of Public Health started just because they're specifically aimed at youth, but those are happening. And there are materials that can be ordered for free off the Massachusetts Clearinghouse that can be posted in like bathrooms, hallway walls, just to kind of give information and dispel some myths. Yes.
I know it's nearly impossible to catch kids vaping, but if you do catch someone, is there a punishment in place? And I also have heard a lot about the fact that kids are selling, vaping products in school. And how does that all work?
So it varies a little bit. There's a series of rules. Okay.
Okay, so the question was, when kids do get caught with vaping materials here at the school, what are the consequences? And there's sort of a range. One of them actually got mentioned here about the MIAA, which I'll talk about in a second. And this comes to us in a variety of ways. Either a student or a teacher will report it to us, or we'll just happen to catch it ourselves, which happens on occasion if one of us happens to pop into a restroom in the building. And so what we do from there is typically we bring the students to the office, have some questions. We typically have them empty their bags or search them if we have reason to believe they have a substance they shouldn't have here in school. And from there, if we catch a student with it, we use the student handbook as sort of a guide for what next. And the consequences vary depending on the age of the student, their discipline history, whether or not it's a first offense or a 10th offense. Those things all matter in how we approach the discipline piece. As Edgar mentioned, suspension's not always effective, and that's not our first go-to, and we do try to do the education piece, and we do try to, sort of come at it from that approach, both a deterrent and an education component. And there's other pieces too. If a student's an athlete, the MIAA may not be a familiar term to you, but that's the governing body for the Athletic Association for the state of Massachusetts, and we actually can't play athletes on our fields in any kind of scored game who have had drug use or nicotine use or have been in possession of any of those materials. So if we do catch a student with those things or passing them off to another, they actually face a consequence, and it's also on an escalating scale. First time offense, if you have vaping materials on you or you've been vaping, you have to sit out, I believe it's 20% of the season. Okay, so that varies. If there's 10 games, that means you sit out 2. If it's hockey and it's 40 games, you sit out the 20% of that. So it varies. And then it escalates. A second time offense increases it all the way up to and including potential exclusion from sports. So that's a big deterrent for our athletes, but it does happen on occasion, and it's a very, steep and sad consequence when that happens, because we think athletics are positive and a good influence in kids' lives, but that is a consequence that's kind of out of our hands. That's the governing body for Massachusetts. So those are some of the bigger picture pieces of what's happening around school and how we're trying to combat this. It's super complicated, and we're seeing a huge spike, like you said, since the Juuls came out. It's nearly impossible. They're so teeny and so easy to hide that it's a real challenge for us.
To kind of piggyback off of that, for example of the type of rise that some cities and towns have seen, I believe it was Somerville who recently tried to take even additional steps to curb youth use by removing the exemption for menthol mint and wintergreen for all stores to sell it to, have it be put in adult-only tobacco retailers, And they've also tried to restrict the sale of e-cigarettes and all e-cigarette supplies to adult-only tobacco retailers. There was a lawsuit, so that is a thing that will happen. They saw almost a 100% increase from pre-Juul to post-Juul in terms of e-cigarette use. So it's like a very drastic rise. Are there any other questions, discussion, things that people want to say? Awesome. Thank you so much. I have products here if people wish to come up, look at them, touch them, feel them, smell them. I do recommend that you smell them. They're very sweet. Thank you so much for coming.